As we flew away from my father's camp, Sapit's words echoed through my mind. Evil is smart. Never forget this. How could I have been so stupid? My wife and I are big fans of his. If I had guns on this baby, I'd blow them to hell. And what did he mean by, and I will have my elephants? I wanted to see my father, but not like this. Donovan, or whatever his real name was, flew over the valley where the cave was. The clouds seemed to be growing. At least I could take some satisfaction in knowing that I'd helped Sapit with the rain ceremony. I don't think I'll go over top of that, Donovan said, nodding at the cloud. We better go around. We're setting up temporary camp at the rendezvous site. We'll spend the night, and tomorrow morning, after your dad shows up, this will all be over. What'll all be over? I asked. He smiled. You'll see soon enough. No doubt, I thought, and looked out the side of the airplane. When we reached the end of the valley, he banked left and flew over the east hill. On the other side was the escarpment road. He paralleled it for 10 minutes, then reduced the power. This is the place, he said. Below were a couple of trucks and a jeep. Several men were setting up tents. Donovan swung the airplane around, eased the nose up, and came in for a landing. He taxied the airplane to the trucks and shut the engine off. He turned to me. I don't know how you managed to escape before, but it's not going to happen again. If your Maasai friend shows up, he will die. If you try to get away, you will die. And, he grabbed my shirt and looked right in my face, your father will die. Do you understand? I nodded. We could have killed your father any time we wanted to, he continued. We've been monitoring his radio calls for a long time. He knows what we want, and he's been very clever about that. Very clever. That's all over now, because we have you. He pushed me away from him. What do you want? I asked. He looked surprised, then laughed. You really don't know, do you? I shook my head. Ivory, he said. Your father has radio collared a herd of elephants with the biggest tusks in Africa. He's the only one who knows where they are, and tomorrow he's going to lead us to them. That explained why my father had been so secretive about his location and why the Institute couldn't reach him. He must have known that the poachers were monitoring the radio. The airplane door opened, and I turned around. Standing there was Moja. So we meet again, he smiled, then yanked me out of the airplane and threw me on the ground. Just as he was about to kick me, Donovan said, Not so rough, Moja. He climbed out after me. After all, Jacob is the one who is responsible for leading us to the prize. Moja looked irritated, but he didn't plant his boot in my side. Instead, he barked some orders at the two men standing next to him. They pushed me over on my stomach, pulled my arms back roughly, and tied my wrists. Secure him outside the cook tent, Donovan said to Moja. I want 2 men guarding him at all times. No one is to talk to him except you and me. If he causes a problem in the camp tonight, the first thing I want your men to do is shoot him. No questions, no hesitation. Is that understood? Moja nodded and translated the orders for the 2 men. They picked me up by my arms and dragged me to the tent. A metal stake had been driven into the ground outside the entrance. They pushed me down and tied my wrists to it, then took up positions on either side of me. I watched as the men put up tents and built a fire in the middle of the camp. From one of the trucks, they unloaded a tall telescoping antenna and hammered stakes into the ground for guide wires. Another man put a table near the antenna and set up a radio. He slipped on a pair of headphones and fooled with the dial. This was no doubt how they monitored my father's calls, and probably every other radio call in the area. No wonder they hadn't been caught. They knew exactly what everyone was doing and could stay one step ahead of them. The first camp I'd been taken to must have been nothing more than a processing plant. What I was seeing now was a command center. The men in this camp were professionals. Evil is smart. Never forget this. Another table was unloaded and carried over the tent where I was tied. A man came out of the tent, said something to the man with the table, and together they positioned it under the awning. He went back into the tent and came out a moment later with a white tablecloth, which he put over the table. On his next trip, he came out with an armful of dishes and silverware and carefully set the table with 2 place settings. I couldn't believe it. They had to have a tremendous amount of money to set up something like this in the middle of nowhere. I looked at the fire. Another man had set up a grill over the fire and was unloading a huge box of pots and pans. Donovan had a personal cook and a waiter. After a while, Donovan came out of his tent wearing a fresh safari suit. Moja walked over to Donovan and they talked for some time. When they finished, Donovan sauntered over to where I was and looked down at me. You must be hungry, he said. I was, but I didn't answer. He smiled and said to one of the guards, You can untie him now. The guard squatted down and took the ropes off. I brought my arms in front of me and rubbed my wrists. That must feel better, he said. You're free to stand. I got stiffly to my feet and stretched. I thought you might want to dine with me, he said. No, I said, I don't want to dine with you. But we've set a place for you. My cook has gone to a lot of trouble for your important guest. I'm not going to eat your food. Well, he said, I can't make you eat, but I can make you sit. No, I said, I'd rather be tied up. I sat back down and put my hands behind my back. My, he said sarcastically, aren't we stubborn? To one of the guards, he said, please seat the gentleman. The guard handed his rifle to the other guard and hauled me to my feet. Donovan pulled a chair out from the table and the guard slammed me down into it. That's better, Donovan said, much more civilized. I wouldn't enjoy my meal at all if I had to look at you tied up. He walked to the other side of the table and sat down across from me. The waiter brought 2 salads out from the tent and set them in front of us. He then brought out a pitcher of water and filled our glasses. Donovan began to eat his salad. I hadn't seen lettuce since I'd been in Nairobi, but I wasn't going to eat it. Is there something the matter with the salad? Yeah, it belongs to you, I thought, but I didn't say anything. He finished his salad, then motioned for the plates to be taken away. The waiter brought the main course over in a pot from the fire. It was meat stew with potatoes, and it smelled wonderful. My mouth watered, but I didn't lift an arm. Donovan tasted the stew and nodded his approval. Delicious, he said. Don't tell me you're not going to eat the stew either. I told you that I'm not going to eat anything of yours. That's very admirable, Jacob, but also very stupid. That's very admirable, Jacob, but also very stupid. You must at least drink some water. We can't have you dying of thirst in the middle of the night. No, I said. I wasn't going to die of thirst, but I wished I could. If I died, they'd have nothing to hold over my father, and they might not find the elephants. I'm not afraid of dying. Everyone is afraid to die, he said. In fact, the fear of dying is the one common denominator everyone shares. That's because they haven't died before, I thought, and I realized how lucky I was to understand that there was something on the other side. I wondered if death was the same for everyone. When Donovan died, would there be a warm white light and a feeling of incredible well-being, or was that the experience something that belonged just to me? You must drink some water, he said. We did not poach it, and it has been purified. It's quite good. No thanks, I said. You're a very difficult boy. He was irritated, and I was glad that I was getting to him. Bring me his water gourd. One of the guards ran off and came back a moment later with Sapit's gourd. He handed it to me. Our water is probably better, Donovan said, but if you prefer, you can drink your own. I smiled and thought of Sapit and thanked him silently for the water, then tilted my head back and took a long drink. Donovan ate the rest of his meal in silence. When he was finished, he stood up. Oh, one more thing, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small stack of letters and tossed them on the table. Your father's mail, he said. Kenya's postal service really stinks. You can deliver them to him tomorrow. He turned to the guard and said, when he's finished, tie him back up. He started to walk away, then stopped and looked at me. We were very sorry to hear about your mother, he said, and continued across the camp to his tent. I watched him walk away, then looked at the letters on the table. They'd all been opened. 4 of the letters were from me. The 5th letter was from my mother. Donovan had known all along why I was in Kenya. I unfolded my mother's letter to my father. It was dated a week before she died. Dear Robert, things are fine on the home front, but your son misses you terribly. The walls are covered with the photos you sent. When you write to him, he marks your camp on the map and dates it. Jacob has turned into a wonderful young man. Like you, he has a serious side and outrageous side. He is brighter than both of us put together. You and I may not have been suited for one another, but we did manage to produce a very special human being. He will do great things one day, I'm sure of it. Please come home soon. You're missing the evolution of something wonderful. Love, Beth. I put my head down on the table to hide my tears.